The PS2 is my favorite console of all time. The fat one, the slim one, it doesn't matter, I don't discriminate. See, growing up I had a PS2 and so did all of my friends. That was it. Gaming to us was the PlayStation 2. I knew there was an Xbox and I knew there was a Gamecube, but I just didn't care. Sure, Halo looked cool, but it just wasn't that serious to me. And in regards to the Gamecube, what the f was I gonna do with the Gamecube? Play Mario Kart? Nah, I'd rather do a chainsaw massacre in San Andreas. Me? Psycho? Nah, couldn't be me. Nobody I knew had an Xbox or a Gamecube, and the PS2 had everything I ever needed. Especially the wrestling games. SmackDown Shut Your Mouth and Here Comes the Pain were all I played. By the time I had my PS2, gaming to me had peaked, okay? In 2003, I was playing a hand-me-down N64 with WrestleMania 2000, which was fun, but yeah, a year later, I was jumping off a helicopter in Times Square. Life changed once I got the PS2. The PS2 along with the SmackDown games were all I needed. Or so I thought. It was all good until I was watching an episode of Raw in 2004 and I saw this commercial.
There's a new game and it's tearing the streets up. Lace your boots if you think you can keep up. Bra and panties match with a diva stripped down. Build your character so strong, opponents skip town. But y'all rookies got a lot to learn. You ain't guaranteed fame, what you get you earn. This is school of hard knocks where you pay your dues. Toughness is measured in your black and blues.
John Cena, my favorite wrestler, rapping about a WWE game, Day of Reckoning, and the game looked fire. It was beautiful. This was the greatest thing I'd ever seen. I was so excited. This was the greatest day of my life. And then I heard the ending.
Everybody else is lame, dude. They can't see me. I be running the Gamecube. Day of Reckoning's coming. Remember I told you. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Gamecube. Rated T for teen.
Gamecube? Gamecube? Bro, why in the blue hell is this game for the Gamecube? The Gamecube sucked for wrestling games. It had WrestleMania 18 and 19. Those were garbage, but now it was getting this? I thought the Gamecube was only for Mario games. What kind of bullshit is this? I was heartbroken. No, like I was literally heartbroken. More commercials came out for the game and the cooler it looked. The cover itself had Trish Stratus, my childhood crush, looking like a dime. Meanwhile on the PS2 I had to stare into the eyes of Vince McMahon. What the fuck? It was sad because I knew I wouldn't be able to play this game. None of my friends had a Gamecube. I for sure wasn't going to get one. My parents just bought me a PS2 that year. I wasn't even gonna try to ask. As I got older, as the years went by, I had a blast playing WWE games. Yeah, the SVR series began and they were legendary, but I always remembered this game. It was always there in the back of my head. The cover, the John Cena rap, the trailers. I even remember seeing this game at a GameStop and looking at the art on the back and just getting sad because it looked so cool. This was a WWE game from the Ruthless Aggression era, my childhood, and I never got to play it. I never had a GameCube, I never had a Wii, and eventually as time went on, I just forgot all about this game. Until now. 16 years later in 2020, I finally sat down and ladies and gentlemen, the boyhood dream has come true. And finally, I played WWE Day of Reckoning. And this game is legendary. I knew this game was going to be elite once I started it up and all I heard was Firefly. Okay, chill, we're not trying to get copyrighted. Playing this game just took me straight back to 2004 and it was the best feeling ever. I felt like a little kid playing this game. Even though I didn't play it as a kid, it just captures the feeling of 2004 so well. From the roster, to the arenas, to the atmosphere. Legit felt like a little kid seeing Thugonomics John Cena come out in his football jersey looking like a crackhead, or seeing the SmackDown 5th stage and The Undertaker taking 50 minutes to make his goddamn entrance. Everything looks so awesome and still holds up to this day. I was just sitting there going through the roster and I knew it wasn't the deepest, but I couldn't help but smile seeing Eddie Guerrero, Kurt Angle, young Randy Orton and young John Cena, even just seeing the most random jobbers like the Basham brothers and just smiling. Before I even played a match, I was in love. But where this game really shines is the gameplay. It's the fact that this game is so unique. This game doesn't try to be a port of the SmackDown games to the GameCube. Nah, it just does its own thing. It has its own identity. Everything about this game is so satisfying. The match starts and it's instantly like, oh shit, here we go. You do impact moves and see the screen shake, the entire ring shakes. As the match goes on, the camera changes and even just the animations. Everything is so satisfying. The gameplay just hits different. This is what a wrestling game on a Nintendo console should feel like, and at first I couldn't figure out what it was. The gameplay seems so familiar, but I couldn't put a finger on it. This game is basically the iconic Aki wrestling games updated to 2004. It's time for a little history lesson, you youngins. In the late 90s, some of the most beloved wrestling games were exclusives to the Nintendo 64. Yeah, before the SmackDown games became the way to play wrestling games, on the Nintendo 64, there was a legendary run of wrestling games made by a company named Aki. WCW Revenge and World Tour, WrestleMania 2000, and of course, No Mercy. Those games are considered to be the holy grails of wrestling games, and I agree, sure, they don't look the best. I mean, what the f are these faces and bodies? But yo, it didn't matter because they played buttery smooth. What Aki did was they created an engine for wrestling games that many consider the best engine for wrestling games. It was amazing, the sky was the limit, every game just got better and better. But then the problem was, the publisher of the games, THQ, moved away from Aki and went to Yuke's. And it was a rest in peace to the good old Aki engine. So for years, fans were missing the good old Aki games, which were a staple of Nintendo wrestling games. See, the PlayStation had its own identity, its own type of wrestling games, and Nintendo had its own identity with the Aki games. It was up to you. What did you want to play? The PlayStation SmackDown games or the Aki games? But once Aki stopped and they weren't a part of the picture anymore, the Nintendo wrestling games were just not that good. But here it was, 4 years later after the last Aki game came out, Nintendo wrestling fans finally got something that was special, something that was worthy of continuing the Nintendo wrestling game legacy, and that was Day of Reckoning. And that's where it all clicks. This game is basically a spiritual successor to No Mercy. The grappling system, the momentum, the reversals, it all makes sense. Is it perfect like No Mercy? Nah, but the core gameplay just takes you back to the days of the prime Nintendo 64 wrestling game days. What makes this game awesome to me is one, obviously it takes place in the Ruthless Aggression era, okay? I love it, just the vibe of the game, it's amazing, but the way it plays is just so special. It's something that even if you aren't a wrestling fan, you can pick this up, just start mashing buttons, throw some strikes and grapples, and you'll have fun, because at the core, it's just a fun fighting game. This isn't a wrestling simulation, this is a good old-fashioned fighting game, beat 'em up style with a wrestling paint over it, and it works so well. The game looks great, it plays great, and I just love how it's so different from the SmackDown games that I grew up playing at the same time. It's just really cool. I don't know how to explain it. Playing this game on a Nintendo console just feels right. This is what wrestling games on the Nintendo consoles have always been. Day of Reckoning had a fantastic story mode. At first you're like, wow, this is pretty simple. I start out as a nobody and eventually I'm gonna go main event WrestleMania. Wow, amazing. But nah, trust me, it's much deeper than that. You start off as a nobody doing local house shows and slowly make it to the main roster, where you get a choice. Do you want to go to Raw or do you want to go to SmackDown? And there are two paths. So if you join Raw, you become the newest member of Evolution. You join Triple H, Flair, Orton and Batista and take over Raw. Or you can go to SmackDown and, well, join The Undertaker's second coming of the Ministry of Darkness. I love the concept. So for months you go through storylines on whatever show you're on, and at the end, of course, just like the tagline of the game, just like how John Cena said in the commercial,
Day of Reckoning's coming, remember I told you. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
you're up against your so-called friend. It's either you versus Triple H or The Undertaker at WrestleMania. The story mode is just fun, being able to play with your created wrestler, and it's tailored to be played with a created wrestler. This game overall just brings a smile to my face, and I didn't even grow up with it. I can only imagine the nostalgia you guys get who grew up with this game. From the soundtrack, which was also an SVR, featuring Breaking Benjamin and Public Enemy, to the arenas looking all perfect, the entrances, the crazy match types. Go have Wild Hell in a Cell and TLC matches, even to the little things like the referee beating your ass when you touch him. Hell, Kurt Angle actually removes the straps in this game when he's about to do his finisher. The story mode is special, and everything in between. This game is a top tier wrestling game. Listen, I know it's not the deepest, it's not the craziest, but shit, this was the return to glory for Nintendo wrestling fans. And the best part is, the next year, the sequel, the grand finale of Nintendo wrestling games, just built on top of this. Once again, my favorite thing about this game is how unique it feels, how it feels like a fighting game, beat 'em up, whatever you want to call it. You can literally just pick it up and play it, and you're gonna have a good time. I wish I played this game as a kid. There is just a charm about this game. At the end of the day, Day of Reckoning is just an awesome wrestling game. This isn't even nostalgia talking. This is just me playing this game for the first time 16 years later after it came out and just loving it. Shout out to the Gamecube. I'm sorry for ever disrespecting this console as a kid.